Morning. The Committee on Education and Labor will come to order, quorum being present. And this morning, we will begin our hearing on the arts and their importance to our country and to our economy by hearing from Congresswoman Louise Slaughter from New York, co-chair of the Arts Caucus and leader in the Arts Caucus for so many years, and Mr. Rob Bishop, a member of this committee from Utah. Congresswoman Slaughter, we're going to begin with you. You'll be recognized for 5 minutes, and then with Mr. Bishop. We need you to pull that microphone closer to you. Is it on? Bend it down a little.
What do we do here? There we are. Okay. I won't go through that again. I just said good morning, everybody. We're going to talk about an issue that is very near and dear to my heart this morning, the promotion of art, music, and creative industries as an essential feature of our local, regional, and national economies. Mr. Chairman, it is such a pleasure to work with you in supporting our creative industries and our creative workforce, and I very much appreciate all of your efforts. As the nation continues to shift from an industrial manufacturing economy to one based on ideas and information, cities and states increasingly recognize that the arts and culture are important economic assets. They create a hub of economic activity that helps an area become an appealing place to live, to visit, and to conduct business. The industries also create jobs, attract investments, generate tax revenues, and stimulate local economies through tourism and urban renewal. And that is why both the National Governors Association and the U.S. Conference of Mayors agree that investing in arts and culture-related industries provide important economic benefits to local and regional economies. It is also no surprise that America's overall nonprofit arts and culture industry generates $166.2 billion in economic activity every single year. The national impact of this activity is significant, supports 5.7 million jobs, and generates $29.6 billion in government revenue. Unfortunately, our creative industries have not been immune to the ongoing economic crisis. In fact, they have been particularly hard hit as corporate donations decrease, consumer spending on arts and cultural activities dwindle, organizations struggle to maintain their budgets, and arts and humanities funding decline as states struggle to manage their fiscal challenges. Indeed, a $7 million or 20% budget decrease in funding for the New York State Council on the Arts resulted in 573 arts organizations throughout New York State receiving no funding. Moreover, the Memorial Art Gallery, the Eastman School of Music at the University of Rochester in my district have seen philanthropic donations from their endowments decrease by over 20%. And public broadcasters in my district and across the country are struggling to maintain exceptional access to the arts in the wake of budget cuts. Individuals who work in the creative industries are suffering. A report released this month by the National Endowment for the Arts found that unemployment rates for artists have risen more rapidly than for U.S. workers as a whole. A total of 129,000 artists were unemployed in the fourth quarter of 2008, an increase of 50,000 people, or 63% from 1 year earlier. The report also found the job market for artists is unlikely to improve until long after the U.S. economy starts to recover. Creative workers who are not losing their jobs are nonetheless still suffering. For example, the Strong National Museum of Play in Rochester has reduced their share of health insurance that they can provide their employees. And the Philharmonic Orchestra has been forced to reduce hours for part-time workers and eliminate some benefits for all of their staff. Clearly now more than ever, we need to continue robust support for our nation's creative industries and workforce. They pay their way. Supporting the millions of people employed in the creative industries, as well as the organizations, businesses, and artistic institutions which contribute to local and regional economies, is simply an imperative this Congress must not cast aside. In addition to helping our workforce, artistic organizations, and cities survive this economic downturn, we should use this time as an opportunity to push for greater investment in arts education to prepare our children for the creative, dynamic, and innovative economy that they will enter. Employers today in America and abroad are looking for imaginative and vibrant young men and women to fill their rosters. Learning through the arts reinforces crucial academic skills in reading, language arts, and math. Just as important, learning through the arts gives young people the skills they need to analyze and synthesize information and to solve complex problems. Educating children early and continuously in the arts will prepare them for work in today's innovative and creative post-industrial society. Again, I thank you for the opportunity to testify before you today and for holding this hearing at such a crucial moment. I look forward to working with you, Mr. Chairman, and Mr. McKeon and others on the committee, as well as everybody else in the House, to help support our creative workforce and industries, and I thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Congressman Bishop?
Well, I appreciate the opportunity of being here. This is a somewhat unusual position for me. I've never been on this side of the dais. I realize, though, that never
We have
before,
hundreds of questions for you.
I realize never before have I had such uninterruptible time, nor have I spoken this early in a committee hearing before, so this is kind of neat. In essence, though, I am testifying to myself, so if I start giggling, I told myself a joke, and I'm not going to share it with the rest of you. I've had a long tradition, actually, of being involved in arts, especially in the state of Utah. I was the House sponsor of what we passed, the Percent for the Art, which was controversial at the time, but it actually added 1% for the buildings of every state building to do simply for art additions to that. I recognize clearly that even if you're not musically inclined, everyone should learn to play the piano, simply because the personal decision that takes to try and learn how to do the fingering and to learn how to count has a remarkable achievement in a life skill. All kids should have auditoriums in their schools, so they're simply taught how to be an audience. When I was in school, even though I was not teaching in drama, I was involved with the Thespians program. I conducted a play every year for the drama teacher to help spread out the work. I accompanied in both schools that I taught for a couple of the plays. I met my wife in a community theater where she was the princess and I was the prince, a role that she regrets ever having accepted. Then later, I became member of the board of our community theater, and I was also the chairman of the board, and I was there as the community theater decided to cut their ties with government spending and go out on their own and be a private community interest. Without that safety net of government spending that was coming to them, I thought it was a very bold move, but it worked because we expanded our audience and we simply found that charitable contributions were a way of continuing the product of a smaller regional type of theater experience. There are some things, though, that government simply cannot do regardless of the approach to it. Whenever the government gets involved in art funding, there are simply always going to be winners and losers. It's a subjective criteria. It will always happen that way. Some people will get something, some won't. What I found in running my small community theater and then a private theater organization was when we tried to get some kind of national grant, the paperwork involved and the strings attached basically weren't worth it. Even when I went to the state of Utah with the Utah Arts Council, which was a much easier group with which to work, there was always the debate going on amongst those who gave out the money. Do we spend a lot of money on a few institutions to make them really good, or do you spread the wealth around? It doesn't matter what the decision is. There will always be some winners. There will always be some losers, because there is no such thing as objective criteria on how to spend money for art. It's always subjective in some particular way. I think the stimulus bill that we passed illustrates how that works. We gave in the stimulus package a whole lot of money for art programs. However, we did not have the time to develop a new criteria. So all the money went to programs that already had existing grants given to them. We didn't actually expand the pie. We didn't actually spend out to more and more institutions to try and help different groups. A few people got healthier. There were bigger winners, and once again, there were losers. It will always be the situation that takes place in that kind of environment. That is why when the administration talks about cutting charitable deductions, that is such a threatening situation, especially for smaller organizations and more rural organizations who rely specifically on those charitable donations to survive. And that is one of the things that is very fearful, especially because when there are charitable contributions, there becomes an emotional bond, an emotional attachment that no government-sponsored program can ever replicate or ever match. It is simply a matter of if there is an entitlement, you're getting federal government money in some way. There is an entitlement mentality that you all recognize in the letters you receive from constituents who believe that they are entitled to something. That doesn't happen when you actually have charitable contributions going forward, back and forth. There is, in a charitable contribution, an exercise in generosity that builds a relationship that is so important, especially for smaller arts organizations and for rural arts organizations. The giver gives because he recognizes there is a worth in that gift and has a desire to help. At the same time, the receiver, at least historically, has given something back, if nothing less and nothing more than gratitude. But there is always a give and take relationship. That is the bond that is development. It's why Christ said, you should give of yourself to the poor. He didn't say, take a knife and mug the first traveler that comes along and take his money to give to the poor. Because there is a relationship that is built when one gives and one receives back and forth. There is a sense of worth between the two institutions. The giver cares about the gift. He cares about the functioning of that institution. He cares about how that institution will operate. And the receiver, on the other hand, also has an increased significance with his stewardship of that particular gift. And that is why charitable contributions are so essential. When I was on the board and chairman of the board of our small theater group, it was essential that we had charitable contributions. And that is why what we should be doing in this country, especially in this environment, is trying to encourage charitable contributions, not discourage them, not in any way try to diminish them for whatever other tax purpose it may be gained. That, by the way, is the same concept we have in our campaigns. We don't go out anymore trying to find a few big donors to fund campaigns. Instead, we get small contributions from a lot of people. And you all realize that when you ask somebody from a campaign, if they give you a $25 bill, that may not fund a whole lot, but you build a relationship with that individual. There is a bond that's developed. It's a strengthening tie. And that is why charitable contributions are so essential. And the one thing that we need to do is do those type of actions that encourages charitable contributions. If we don't, there are going to be more winners and more losers. And those losers, unfortunately, are going to be smaller organizations. They're going to be more rural organizations where we actually need to expand the art and what it can do. I'm sorry, I just realized.
See how tough it is to be on that side of the table?
Something
Now
government.
you can jump up and come on this side of the table.
Can I ask myself a question now?
On your own time.
No, I apologize. I'm sorry. I apologize. I was a minute and a half over and I didn't look there. I apologize for that, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, both of you, for your testimony, for your support, and we look forward to continuing to work with you. Thank you so much. We're going to now ask our panel of witnesses to come forward, and I'm going to recognize Mr. Lynch, Mr. Spring, Mr. Barr, Mr. Daly, Mr. Ridge, Joanne Florino, and Mr. Tomayasin. If you'll come forward, please. And the chair is going to recognize himself for the purposes of making an opening statement. I was waiting for my Republican counterpart to show. Mr. Guthrie's here, and I'll begin. Today we'll look at the impact of two important sectors of our economy, the arts and music, and how losses in these fields are impacting workers, families, communities across the country. Their contributions to our economy are frequently and unfairly overlooked. Our economy is in the worst crisis this nation has seen since the Great Depression. Workers are losing jobs at a rate of over 600,000 a month. Families are losing income and benefits, and communities are suffering. The unemployment rate has hit a 25-year high. The nonprofit arts and cultural industries inject over $166 billion into our economy each year, according to recent studies by Americans for the Arts. These sectors support 5.7 million jobs and over $104 billion in household income. In many places like my home state of California, for example, the arts and music industries are vital engines of local economies, making up large shares of revenue and providing many employment opportunities. Spending by nonprofit arts and cultural organizations provide work for more than just artists, curators, and musicians. They also directly support builders, plumbers, accountants, printers, and an array of other occupations. Workers in these fields are bearing a disproportionate brunt of this economic tsunami. According to recent research conducted by the National Endowment for the Arts, unemployment in the arts rose at a higher rate than the overall workforce in 2008. In fact, the unemployment rate for artists is double that of other professional workers. In the last quarter of 2008, the unemployment rate by artists grew by 64%, for a total of 129,000 displaced workers. This is playing out even in the most iconic art venues. In January, more than a dozen Broadway shows in New York closed, and Carnegie Hall has cut its schedule down by 10%. In Philadelphia, the Philadelphia Art Museum announced it would eliminate 30 positions. The Miami City Ballet has cut 53 of its dancers. Right here in D.C., the Smithsonian has instilled a hiring freeze. The community theaters across the country, from Massachusetts to South Carolina, from Baltimore to San Francisco, are closing their doors. Without the contributions and influence of the arts, our economy suffers greatly. Families suffer from layoffs, lost income, and purchasing power. When we talk about the arts and music, we're not just talking about artists and musicians. We're also talking about museums and galleries and symphonies and orchestras, communities, theaters, and nonprofits that shape our neighborhoods, our towns, and our cities. This industry attracts audience, spurs local business development, stimulating learning in classrooms. Research shows that when students are exposed to arts and music, they perform better in other subjects. President Obama has made it clear that the arts and music have a critical role in improving our workforce, our schools, and our quality of life. Arts and music and other cultural activities bring out our creativity and make us richer as individuals and communities. For this very reason, President Obama's economic recovery plan included $50 million in investment of save jobs in the arts and supplement declines in charitable giving and keep cultural activities thriving in the communities. He isn't the first president to recognize the importance of promoting the arts economy in times of recession. President Roosevelt made arts a focal point of his New Deal to lift the nation out of the Great Depression. His goal was to create programs that would help every American, no matter how poor, how hungry, or how desperate. He created the WPA administration. This included creating government relief programs for 10,000 unemployed artists, who helped create 100,000 easel paintings, 18,000 sculptures, 13,000 prints, and 4,000 murals and other works of art that have helped enrich our nation. When Harry Hopkins, who President Roosevelt tasked to run the program, was questioned about it, he responded, "Hell, they've got to eat just like any other people." Many of these murals can still be seen in schools, post offices, and other government buildings. In my district, the Vacaville Post Office proudly displays Fruit Season, oil painting by Emmerich Nicholson portraying the agricultural culture of that time of that community. Today's hearings kicks off a series our committee will be holding this spring to examine how arts and music can help rebuild our towns and cities, spur economic growth, and how they can help improve student learning. I look forward to hearing from our witnesses about supporting the arts and music can help us build a stronger America, and thank you very much for being here. And now I'd like to yield to Mr. Guthrie for the purposes of making an open statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning. And Mr. Daly, I've spent a lot of times I should have been studying, watching you on television when I was in college. I appreciate you did a very great show, and I enjoyed watching it very much. But one of the benefits of living in a free society is that its citizens are free to create. This freedom has given birth to art forms that Americans and people around the world have enjoyed for decades. Take music, blues, country, jazz, rock and roll, all of them come from America. Then there's Broadway and Hollywood. For more than a century, American films, plays, musicals, and TV shows have been loved and respected the world over. Mr. Chairman, we should be proud of our artists, but not just for their creative achievements. After all, they're in show business. It's a real industry that has ups and downs like any other. And what helps support this industry? In large measure, nonprofit and charitable foundations. When you look beyond the superstars with their mansions and their millions, you find that many talented working artists across the country are supported this way. Experts say the $43 billion that foundations give out help generate more than $500 billion in household income. It also contributed some $145 billion in tax revenues. That's music to a lot of people's ears, especially in these times, but it seems President Obama wants to stop the music and send the band home. The Obama administration's new budget would limit charitable deductions in the tax code. These tax deductions allow, even encourage people to give to foundations and charities. Whether they contribute $25 or $25 million, a deduction applies to them. And foundations need these donations. Usually individual contributions are often their sole source of income. So if you limit charitable deductions, you limit support of the arts and other worthy causes. It's that simple. Don't take my word for it. Ask Martin Fieldstein. He's an economics professor from Harvard. He wrote an op-ed piece in the Washington Post yesterday about this very subject. In his article, Fieldstein says, President Obama's proposal would effectively transfer $7 billion a year from the nation's charitable institutions to the federal government. This transfer, Fieldstein says, would basically be a nationwide tax on charities. After speaking with Professor Fieldstein, go talk to the Association of Performing Arts Presenters. In a report out this month, the association says that more than half of the performing groups with theaters and facilities have failed to meet their fundraising goals. As the Obama administration tinkers with the tax code, it's important that we, as members of Congress, understand how it affects nonprofits and foundations. Whether supporting a local theater group, homeless shelter, or children's hospital, nonprofits and charities play a starring role in American life. We should create policies that best increase philanthropy and private resources available for charities, including support of the arts. Finally, we should highlight how private charities are independent, effective, and innovative, just like American artists, including the ones with us today. And I have an American artist at home. My 11-year-old is active in our Children's Youth Theater and going to be in Charlotte's Web next month. So that's an advertisement. If you're going to be in Bowling Green, Kentucky, to come see them, then and it has really made a difference. It's a place where she fits in, where other kids play sports and TV. She fits in on the stage and has really enjoyed it. Well, thank you, Chairman Miller, and I yield back.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Again, welcome to the committee. Thank you for giving us your time and your expertise. I'm going to introduce you quickly here, and then we're going to begin with your testimony. Mr. Lynch, we're going to begin with you. When you begin testifying, a green light will go on in front of you. Unlike Mr. Bishop, you will see the red light come on. It's commanded that you'll see the red light come on. At that point, your time will expire. There will be an orange light, which will tell you you have about a minute. 5 minutes is a very short period of time, so organize your thoughts well, but we want you to be able to be comfortable in delivering your testimony in a manner you think is coherent. And then we'll have time for questions. This hearing will end by 12 o'clock. My concern is that we're into the amendment process on the floor, and I'm not quite sure when we will be asked to go to the floor for votes, and depending on those circumstances, if it is a long series of votes, which it may be, hopefully we'll be done before then, but if not, we will not hold you until after those votes. That's something witnesses should not have to endure, is when we leave the room for an hour and you have to stay here. But thank you. With all of those conditions, we really welcome your testimony. First, let me begin by introducing Robert L. Lynch, who is the President and CEO of Americans for the Arts, a national organization dedicated to advancing the arts and arts education. Under his 24 years of leadership, the organization has grown over 50 times its original size. In 2005, Mr. Lynch created Americans for the Arts Action Fund to engage citizens in advocating its arts-friendly public policies. Mr. Lynch plays the piano, mandolin, guitar, and lives in Washington, D.C. Michael Spring is the director of the Miami-Dade County Department of Cultural Affairs. Michael Spring serves as director of that organization, and for over 25 years he has served at the department. He has helped build Miami-Dade County's cultural community into more than $922 million annual industry comprised of more than 1,000 nonprofit cultural groups and thousands of artists. Mr. Spring represents the department in numerous cultural and civic communities, and he continues to paint and develop his interest in visual artists. Michael Barr is education director of the Utah Shakespeare Festival, where he has created numerous outreach programs for students. As a teacher in theater arts in Utah and California schools, Mr. Barr developed educational theater programs, grade schools, junior highs, and high schools. He received many awards for his work, including a 2-year nomination for the Huntsman Award and Outstanding Teacher of the Year. Tim Daly serves as co-president of the Creative Coalition, a nonprofit, nonpartisan social and political advocacy organization for the entertainment industry. He's a veteran actor and has played a variety of roles in film and television. Mr. Daly received an Emmy nomination for his outstanding guest actor in the drama series for his role as JT in the HBO series The Sopranos. He currently stars in the Season 2 of ABC's Private Practice, and is also producing a documentary film called Pollywood, which takes an in-depth look at the 2008 presidential election. Bruce Ridge is chairman of the International Conference of Symphony and Opera Musicians, a conference of American Federation of Musicians, and a member of the North Carolina Symphony, where he plays a double bass. Nationally, Mr. Ridge leads the conference's work in arts and advocacy, improving labor relations throughout the field. He has spoken around the country to orchestral musicians and arts administrators about increasing orchestra services to their communities through enhancing business development and strengthening the arts education. Joanne Florino has been Executive Director of the Triad Foundation of Ithaca, New York since April 2003. The Triad Foundation makes over $9 million in grants each year, including grants in the arts and locations such as Charlotte, North Carolina, Tampa, Florida, Ithaca, New York. Prior to working at Triad, Mrs. Florino worked as the Executive Director of the Parks Foundation, where she administered grant-making programs primarily focused in higher education. John Tomayason directs the National Governors Association Center on Best Practices, which helps governors and their policy advisors develop and implement innovative solutions to governance and policy changes. The National Governors Association Center helps governors and their staffs develop cutting-edge solutions to stay ahead of potential problems. As the Center Director, Mr. Tomayason, oversees all areas of domestic policy with particular areas of expertise including energy, health care reform, homeland security, infrastructure, the economy, and the arts. With that, let me again welcome you. Mr. Lynch, we're going to begin with you. Thank you.
Well, I want to thank you very much, Chairman Miller, for this opportunity. Also, I want to thank so many members of the committee for being here. It's very exciting to have this kind of a turnout. The opportunity here is for us to talk about the broad spectrum of the arts: visual art, performing art, music, theater, dance, the creative industries as a whole. And I want to just, I have written testimony that I've sent forward. I simply want to say a few words, a few remarks that relates to that. And my remarks are basically that I have great news and I have tough news. And you've heard some of the both already as we've gone forward. Louise Slaughter, the great leader of our Congressional Arts Caucus, has been very articulate on talking about both the problems that the arts face and the opportunities here. The great news is this. We know that there are 686,000 organizations out there, for-profit and non-profit organizations in the arts. We know that they employ 2.8 million people. That's more than most people realize. And right there, it's interesting to look at that as 4.2% of all businesses in America and over 2% of all the jobs in America. And it's a growth industry as a whole. The figures from 2008 to 2009, there's a 10% growth in the numbers of these organizations. When we take a look at these creative industries, if I were to take a look at Congressman Miller's district, there are 1,292 businesses, arts businesses in that district, employing 3,983 people. And simply looking at the committee members, each of you has a packet with those figures, but I look at Congresswoman Clark's district, 1,287 businesses employing 4,000 people. Congresswoman Fudge's district, 1,416 businesses employing 9,320 people. This is big. This is important. This is good news for the arts. And it's the kind of news that the United States Conference of Mayors thought was so important that they, when they came forward with their 10-point plan for a better America to the current administration, they included the arts as one of the 10 points. Another thing that's very important for this committee, arts education. Arts education is at the core of creating those audiences and helping to create the actual artists themselves. And the conference board recently, the organization that all of business goes to for its information, came forward with a study that said that the businesses in the 21st century, number one thing they want is creativity, creative 21st century workers. But what was even more interesting is that they thought that along with the superintendents of schools and other leaders in education, that the top of the list for creating creativity was having arts education in the schools. This is from the business community, not from Americans for the Arts, and I think that's very significant. If I turn to the not-for-profit community, 100,000 of those 686,000 businesses are not-for-profit businesses. Museums and theaters and dance companies in every corner of the country, in every one of your districts. 5.7 million jobs come either directly or indirectly out of that nonprofit business. You heard Congresswoman Slaughter mention it as a $166 billion economic impact, returning $29 billion to federal, state, and local tax coffers. one thing that I think you here in this committee should realize is that that growth industry largely was helped in 1965 when you launched the current infrastructure of support in the arts in America today, the National Endowment for the Arts coming out of this committee, the state structure of state arts agencies and the local arts agencies across the country, the infrastructure of support as we know it today. What I think is exciting there is that there's proof with those figures that the arts mean business, big business in this country. Now for some tough news. 10,000 of those organizations are at risk in America. 10% of those organizations are at risk of going out of business entirely. 260,000 jobs would be lost if that were the case. The other 90% are having trouble as well, and there's job loss there as well. But those figures get even bigger than we'd want to actually look at as a loss in this country. You've heard already that artists are unemployed currently at twice the rate of other professionals, the National Endowment for the Arts. Where does the money for the arts come from in America? We've talked about a number of things here, but it's basically pretty simple. Those 100,000 nonprofit organizations get their money from three sources. Half their money comes from earned income. That means the ticket buyer, the person who attends an event, is important, and disposable income is down, so that's being hurt. 40% comes from the private sector, donations, corporate, individual, foundation. With portfolios down, that money is hurt. The last 10% comes from government, most of it from local government and then state government, and a tiny piece from the federal government. But that federal government piece has been the part that has leveraged all the rest over the last half century. So I think that it's important to understand that dynamic and then look at all of, I am not going to read the list of hundreds of organizations that I have here that are actually going out of business all across the country or at risk, but I will submit that as part of the testimony.
Thank you.
What I want to say is there's hope on the
You're
horizon.
going to say it very quickly, Mr. Lynch.
And you have given that hope. The Omnibus Bill, $10 million more for the National Endowment for the Arts. The Economic Recovery Bill, $50 million more, going out through that mechanism across the country. That hope is important, and what it says to me is that the arts are important, arts jobs and arts and economic impact are important and bigger than most people realize. The arts in America are at risk, and I ask the committee to help others understand that the arts are not part of the problem, but part of the solution to America's problems. Thank you.
Mr. Spring.
Thank you for this opportunity to talk about the economic and employment impact of the arts from a local perspective. For the past 27 years, our Miami-Dade County Department of Cultural Affairs has been at the center of one of our nation's most dynamic, diverse, and rapidly growing arts communities. In 1982, there were a little more than 100 nonprofit arts organizations in Miami. Today, there are more than 1,000 arts businesses. I want to begin with a short story about just one of these arts organizations, Miami City Ballet. Each season, this 23-year-old company employs hundreds of people, not just the more than 50 dancers who've established the ballet as one of our nation's great dance companies, but also company administrators, accountants, carpenters, stagehands, seamstresses, teachers, and physical therapists. 2 months ago, Miami City Ballet made its triumphal appearance at City Center in New York City. The Times raved about the appearance, saying, "This is as good an advertisement for its home city as any ballet company in America." Less than 2 weeks later, back in Miami, the ballet announced that due to the worsening economy, it was laying off dancers and reducing its budget by more than 25% for next year. There are more layoffs likely to come. Now, I could have told this story from a human interest perspective in a shameless attempt to pull on your heartstrings, but that's not the point of my testimony today. Instead, this story points out that our cultural sector is a major player in promoting Miami's new image for business and tourism, and it underscores the fact that arts organizations are subject to the very same forces and effects on America's and the world's economic viability, job loss, and downsizing. So what did you really expect from a guy from Miami? Perhaps testimony about the economy's impact on South Beach hotels and on our Ocean View condo market. Instead, you got a story about the ballet and jobs. Well, Miami-Dade County is an endlessly surprising place, even for those of us who grew up there. Our county government is investing more than $1 billion in cultural infrastructure that's being matched multifold by businesses and individuals. Our Department of Cultural Affairs is one of the largest in terms of budget size in the United States. Why is Miami-Dade County investing so aggressively in the arts? Well, the answer is really simple. Our local elected officials, our business leaders, and the public understand that a community's culture is the cornerstone of its economic vitality. We have the facts to support this. Our recent report on the arts and the local economy documented a $922 million impact by our arts and cultural industry each year. Our nonprofit cultural organizations employ more than 23,000 workers. The more than 12 million people who attend cultural events each year spend more than $500 million beyond just buying a ticket to performances. They park their cars in garages. They spend their monies in restaurants, hotels, and shops before and after being energized by great theater, dance, and exhibition. These days, rhetoric in Miami that attempts to stereotype as the arts as a frill is drowned out quickly. There's overwhelming evidence all around us that cultural facilities and nonprofit arts organizations are employing people, making our community better, improving kids' lives, and playing a catalytic role in neighborhood and business redevelopment. Now, I know the people who work in our cultural industry. They're passionate about what they do, and they have to be, or they wouldn't be in this business. The average cultural worker in our community makes about $28,000 a year. That's approximately 30% less than the community's overall average salary. And like many other American workers, our arts employees work more than one job to make ends meet. Now, my mayor and the 13 members of our county commission see this phenomenal commitment every day. The budget for our Department of Cultural Affairs has more than quadrupled over the past decade. Even my exceedingly loyal staff of public servants knows that this is not just attributable to my charm and good looks. It's a recognition by our local elected leaders that the arts are a great investment for our community. The signal that our county is sending to our cultural workforce and to the business and individuals who support the arts is powerful. It's akin to the signal that this Congress recently sent across our nation when $50 million was approved for the NEA as part of the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act. It says that you understand that, like other industries, jobs in the cultural sector are being lost and jeopardized. It says to us that artists and cultural businesses are part of the solution for restarting our economy and rekindling the creativity and the character that continue to make America great. I urge you to reinvest even more significant resources in the arts to help achieve America's economic and human recovery and revival. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Barr.
Press the button. Chairman Miller, members of the committee, I'm Michael Barr, the Education Director for the Utah Shakespearean Festival, and I'm grateful for this opportunity to share the impact the festival has on its community and the challenges that are affecting not only us, but our sister organizations across the country. The festival has played a large role in defining the rural town in which we live, and therefore the present status of the economy threatens not only the arts and our industry, but Cedar City, Utah itself. Let me share a little bit about the festival. The Utah Shakespearean Festival, now in its 48th year, is destination theater that produces Shakespeare and other classic plays and repertory. And is located in rural Iron County and is hosted on the campus of Southern Utah University in Cedar City, Utah, a town of 28,000 people. The festival produces 9 plays and repertory for 130,000 attendees a year. The average patron travels over 200 miles one way to attend, with primary audience coming from Utah, Nevada, Arizona, and Idaho. These patrons generate $30 to $35 million for the local economy through lodging, dining, shopping, fuel, and recreation. The festival's budget for 2008 was $6.7 million. Our funding is approximately 75% earned income, that's ticket sales, concessions, and merchandise, and 25% unearned income in grants, foundations, and gifts. I'd encourage you to read the minutes we have before you about our lovely history. Let me get to the good stuff, or shall I say the bad stuff. Sales for our 2009 season are currently nearly 20% behind where we were last year. Foundations have already significantly reduced their gifts because of shrinking or non-existent portfolios. Consequently, our budget, which was $6.7 million for the 2009 year, is now $5.9 million. At $5.9 million, we have cut about $800,000 in total cost, but in reality, the cuts are much deeper. These cuts include the following: 3 full-time positions from a 28-member staff to 25. But what really hurts is 55 seasonal positions. We have a staff of 390 total employees, which is now down to 335. Those are actors, electricians, costumers, carpenters, company managers, etc. Because for every one actor, there are 7 people that support those 1 actors. All live musicians for the present season have been cut. 1 week reduction in the summer season, 1 week reduction in the fall season, and a 2-week reduction in rehearsal times. Our fall season, which included Pericles, a very large, wonderful Shakespeare play, has now been reduced to Tuesdays with Morries and the complete works of William Shakespeare and Woman in Black, all 2- and 3-person shows. Our theater, like other businesses, is required to pay unemployment. When an employee does not find a job after his work is finished with us, he goes to another part of the country, and when unemployment is found, we have to pay that unemployment. Last year, or in an average year, we pay approximately $60,000 to $70,000 annually in unemployment fees. Last year, we saw that double to $130,000, and just in the month of February alone, we have paid $14,000 in unemployment for actors outside of the country, outside of our area after they've left our area. Cedar City merchants and civic leaders have already expressed great concern about these cuts. We think it's clear that by cutting 2 weeks from our season, cutting the size of our shows and the amount of material we buy to produce them, by cutting the number of employees we hire, the economic benefit to our community will decrease measurably. Cedar City benefits economically from the many visitors who travel to the festival each year. Various economic impact studies have been done. In 2002, the International Festival and Events Association estimated the economic impact from the festival on our community was $64 million, and Americans for the Arts in 2007 found that the nonprofit arts were $22.47 million. We see that, and in talking with our Chamber of Commerce, as about $30 to $35 million. In addition to serving Iron County, the festival, through its education department, has a strong relationship with educational entities. We are part of the National Endowment for the Arts, Shakespeare for a New Generation, and serve 70 schools and 30,000 students annually. They have also contacted us and are worried about cuts happening within this area. Perhaps the most revealing story of the impact of the festival on Cedar City is the building of a new theater during the 1980s recession, and I think this is relevant now. For many years, Cedar City's economy had been bolstered by active iron mines around the town. As the bottom fell out of the iron market during the 80s, the mines were closed and jobs were lost. But the festival was still running at 98% in attendance. And so the city fathers and the festival said, let's throw our money into this. And with help from housing and urban development, we had $2.3 million that we invested in a $7.5 million new theater. Within 5 years, we recouped all of that cost through increases in sales and property taxes alone within our area. Art in Cedar City is not luxury, it's business. It feeds our souls and our families. It hires an educated and talented workforce. It provides positive economic impact far beyond the theater. Around 1590, a farm boy from the country whose father dealt in sheep and gloves traveled to the big city of London and started writing plays. His plays became successful, and he bought interest in his theater. He was a businessman, and it was good business. He says, "The man that hath no music in himself, nor is not moved with concord of sweet sounds, is fit for treason, stratagems, and spoils. Let no such man be trusted." Mark the music. May we preserve and mark the music, art, theater, and dance that moves us and keeps us all human. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Daly.
Thank you, Chairman Miller and members of the committee. My name is Tim Daly. I'm here as an actor, producer, director, and co-president of the Creative Coalition, which is a nonprofit, nonpartisan public advocacy organization of the arts and entertainment community. I want to thank you for holding this hearing and for allowing me to testify and echo a lot of the things that my fellow testifiers have said. You know, I'm just not sure that enough people understand that millions of Americans earn their livelihoods through the arts and ancillary professions, or that the entertainment is America's second largest export. Too often we look at the arts as something extra, something outside of our daily lives, as a luxury item, and I'm here to, I'm on a mission to make people understand that arts are part of our cultural, educational, and our economic main course. They are not dessert. So today I'd like to show you how I see things firsthand as a working actor in the commercial sector. I'd also like to leave you with a couple of thoughts about ways I think we can ensure that our arts economy remains vibrant. First, a little background about how arts have impacted my own family. After serving in World War II in the Navy for 5 years, my dad moved to New York, where he made his living working on Broadway and off-Broadway in the theater, and then later in television. And decades before I played a doctor on private practice, he was known as Dr. Paul Lochner on a TV series called Medical Center. And of course, my sister Tyne Daly is a wonderful and well-known actor, and now a third generation is entering the business, including Tyne's daughter and my own son. God help them both. And my son needs a job, by the way, so anyway. So my family accounts for at least a few of the roughly 45,000 professional actors that the Bureau of Labor Statistics estimates are working in the United States. But that number doesn't begin to capture the real employment impact of the entertainment industry. For instance, when a studio greenlights a movie, the press is filled with news about the star, but the real story is the thousands of people that are put to work on that production. The next time you're in the movies, stay in your seat and watch the entire credit roll to the end, and you'll get an idea of the number of people who work so hard to bring that film to the screen. And the economic impact on the community is enormous. My show, Private Practice, for instance, which is an hour-long TV drama, it takes us 9 days to shoot an episode. We employ about 200 people full-time during that production season. For 2 of those 9 days, we have an additional crew of 50 people on the set, and each episode can have between 100 and 300 extras. But beyond that, in any single 9-day period, the show spends about $20,000 on food for caterers, $25,000 to $40,000 on clothes and costumes, $15,000 on sets and furniture, and $2,500 on dry cleaning, which is, I mean, that could keep a dry cleaners open, one TV show. And yet people seldom make that connection. But if you add up the numbers and the tax revenue and the money spent in the community by those employed on the show, you'll quickly see how big the economic impact is. But I think the story is, there's a lot more to it. I've been thinking a lot lately about the iPod. A recent study by researchers at UC Irvine estimate that 14,000 jobs with wages of $753 million were created in the U.S. as a result of the iPod in 2006. The innovation, engineering, technology, manufacturing of this ubiquitous product would not exist without people's desire to enjoy music in their daily lives. Without art, there's no iPod. So we have to take those jobs into account. Art and entertainment are important engines of our economy, and we can't take that for granted. We have to invest in it like we invest in any other sector, and here are a couple of ways we can do that. First, federal support for the arts plays a pivotal role. We're really grateful for the expanded NEA funding and the stimulus, and we encourage continued and strong and growing support for nonprofit arts sector. The investment is so small when one looks at the returns both to society and both culturally and economically. And second, we have got to nurture the next generation by giving our kids access to art in schools. I know that's primarily a state responsibility, but the economic consequences of letting arts in schools atrophy will be felt nationally. In rough times, arts is usually the first thing to go, and we need to give our kids a chance to exercise their imagination so that they can be the most creative and innovative thinkers that they can be, whether they wind up as artists, engineers, scientists, mathematicians, politicians. We need creative thinkers to compete in the global economy, and arts train the creative mind. If just one person's creative spark catches fire, the economic impact can be enormous. I'm thinking of the artistic vision of Shonda Rhimes, who created both the hit series Grey's Anatomy and Private Practice. She's essentially an inventor who started 2 successful companies, 2 television shows. She's a storyteller. But what she's done is provided good jobs, pumped millions of dollars into our economy each week. And if a businesswoman were to open a factory employing thousands of people, we'd hail her entrepreneurial spirit and see how we could support her with public policy, replicate her success. An artist can have the same economic impact, yet we see her as a creator of stories and not as a creator of jobs, and we've got to change that misconception. Yes, arts inspire us, they entertain us, they reflect back to us our triumphs, our failures, they bring us beauty and joy, they challenge our beliefs, and at best, they nourish our souls. But we've also got to recognize that arts employ our neighbors, they support small businesses, create jobs, and foster innovations. We have got to start discussing arts as part of our daily lives, and they are part of our culture and our education and our economic main course. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to testify. I really do look forward to answering your questions if you have them, and I mean that.
We'll take that direction. Mr. Ridge.
Good morning, Chairman Miller and members of the committee. My name is Bruce Ridge. I am chairman of the International Conference of Symphony and Opera Musicians, or ICSOM, which is a conference of the American Federation of Musicians. I'm also a double bassist in the North Carolina Symphony. On behalf of ICSOM's thousands of members and AFM's tens of thousands of members, comprising over 230 affiliated locals across the country, including Local 367 in Vallejo and Local 424 in Richmond, in your district, Mr. Chairman, I thank you for your attention to this issue.
So do they.
In 1932, my orchestra was founded by the WPA. That was also a time of economic crisis, but instead of cutting back, we invested in the arts. Critics sometimes say that classical music is just for the elite, but as an orchestral musician, I know how much everyone loves to hear us play, and the numbers bear this out. Opera attendance has increased 40% since 1990. Classical music accounts for 12% of sales on iTunes, and music schools across the country are seeing an all-time high in numbers of applicants. Musicians don't do it for the money. We're ultimately the nation's biggest donors to the arts, and we're the ones who sacrifice to keep orchestras alive in hard times. We happily give to the arts, but we must still pay doctors' bills, make rent, and feed our families. I've been fortunate in my career. I started playing at age 10, and I've worked steadily as an orchestral musician for 30 years. By age 15, I was a working professional in the Virginia Symphony. I would go from school to symphony and then play in late-night jazz clubs I was too young to legally get into otherwise. Back home by 3 a.m., I'd be sitting in school just a few hours later. And although I may have started a bit younger than others, my story is not atypical. Many classical musicians work several jobs, driving from town to town as members of a freeway philharmonic. Some members work in as many as 4 different orchestras, each a different 2-hour commute from home, and each with its own set of concerts, rehearsals, and community involvement. In today's economic climate, the challenges for working musicians are growing ever more serious. Many orchestras face the prospect of reduced seasons, layoffs, lower wages, and higher health care premiums. This is a national problem. The musicians of the Cincinnati Symphony, one of the world's finest orchestras, recently accepted an 11% pay cut. The Baltimore Opera Company has filed for bankruptcy. The Santa Clarita Symphony in Congress McKeon's district canceled its 2009 season. The musicians of the Honolulu Symphony are now 7 weeks behind in paychecks. On a daily basis, my phone rings with more news of yet another orchestra's financial crisis. For musicians, the losses are immeasurable. Some must sell their instruments to make ends meet, while others face the loss of their careers altogether. Many of these musicians have children or spouses who depend on them and who also suffer from these cutbacks. How could I respond when a woodwind musician asked me how she could afford to take her child to a doctor after her orchestra's proposed cutbacks? Our losses are everyone's losses. If musicians can't afford to stay in the profession, the nation will lose its music. Musicians are small business people, patching together royalties, concert fees, and union benefits like session fees, pension, and health care to come up with a decent living. On Broadway, musicians face replacement by recorded music substituted for live music. In Hollywood, outsourcing film scores to musicians abroad threatens the livelihood of American musicians. Congress can make, and indeed already has made, a big difference in these musicians' lives. The American Jobs Creation Act helped our recording musicians by providing tax incentives for domestic film production. Pension reform legislation has also helped the AFM keep its pension plan available to musicians. And Chairman Miller, we thank you for your leadership on this important issue. Several members of this committee have co-sponsored H.R. 848, the Performance Rights Act, which gives recording artists the right to royalties when their performances are played over AM/FM radio. Recorded music makes money for radio, but radio doesn't pay performers a single cent. The Performance Rights Act would correct this inequity, and we ask you to consider supporting this important legislation. Indeed, entertainment is America's second largest export, and music is essential to nearly all of its forms, either standing alone as part of theater, film, and television. We can count the dollars, but we can't count the value of music to the American spirit. We saw it when the New York Philharmonic traveled to North Korea on a mission of diplomacy and artistry, and the nation and the world were electrified by those images. And we see it here at home when my own WPA-founded North Carolina Symphony plays free concerts for tens of thousands of school children every year. I can't even go to the grocery store without people telling me how much it meant to them when the North Carolina Symphony played at their school. The value of these experiences cannot be measured and must not be lost. And on behalf of musicians everywhere, I thank you for this opportunity to address the committee.
Thank you. Ms. Florino.
Good morning, Chairman Miller, Mr. Guthrie, and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify before you on the value of foundation giving to the arts and potential threats to that giving. My name is Joanne Florino. I am the Executive Director of the Triad Foundation. We are based in Ithaca, New York, and we are a family foundation. We make over $9 million in grants each year, and a significant portion of our grant making goes toward arts education and cultural programs in the states of New York, North Carolina, and Florida. Additionally, I am here on behalf of the Alliance for Charitable Reform. The Alliance was founded in 2005 as a project of the Philanthropy Roundtable, which represents over 600 private foundations across the United States. ACR was formed to respond to legislative proposals on Capitol Hill that affect foundations and the charities they serve. As I know you're aware, the arts community relies heavily on private contributions. According to recent data by the National Endowment for the Arts, private contributions accounted for 43% of arts organizations' financing, or $13.5 billion, compared to 13% from government. The Triad Foundation is proud to be among the many foundations who give generously to these causes. And in our grant making, we seek to expand access to the arts, expand the audience for the arts, and expand the pool of current and future donors to the arts. An example is a $1 million challenge grant which Triad made to Imagine On in Charlotte, North Carolina. That grant stimulated a $1 million match by other donors in that city. Imagine On is now the home of the Children's Theater of Charlotte and the Public Library of Charlotte and Mecklenburg County's Youth Services Department. The opportunity to co-locate those two organizations has resulted in outstanding programming and more accessible arts and cultural education programs for the youth of Charlotte, North Carolina. As you know, there is a proposal in President Obama's 2010 budget that could have a chilling effect on private giving, particularly as it relates to arts organizations. The proposal would essentially make it more expensive for individuals to contribute to charities, either directly or through foundations, by limiting the value of the itemized deduction individuals receive for making such gifts. In fact, Indiana University's Center for Philanthropy estimates that the proposal would represent a 20% increase to the cost of giving. On behalf of both the Triad Foundation and the Alliance for Charitable Reform, I believe this proposal is a step in the wrong direction and comes at a time when Americans and the government are relying more, not less, on the nonprofit sector. The House Budget Committee released their budget proposal yesterday. And fortunately, their proposal excluded President Obama's proposed limit on the charitable deduction. It is clear that this proposal is troubling to both members of Congress and the charitable community. I do want to thank the members of the House Budget Committee for excluding that proposal. Deteriorating economic conditions are forcing charities to face higher demands for services with fewer resources. When we look at human services, we see the example of the Midnight Mission Shelter in Los Angeles, which estimates that the downturn in the economy is leading them to provide 15,000 more meals each month, even though donations are down $200,000 from the previous year. The arts community faces the same challenges. The Wall Street Journal reported that the Baltimore Opera's board recently voted to liquidate the organization. And I have to say that those of us who work with nonprofits know that resurrecting a dead nonprofit is far more difficult than maintaining one. The Detroit Institute of the Arts reduced 20% of its staff as part of a $6 million budget cut. So this new budget proposal comes at a terrible time. According to a January 2009 study by MetLife, cash flow concerns have forced 40% of Americans to give less often to charities. And I have to believe that that's also causing the drop in arts audiences. On top of that, the Tax Policy Center estimated that the administration's itemized charitable deduction proposal, coupled with higher rates on individuals, would result in a $9 billion drop in giving for 2011, roughly triple the yearly budget of the American Red Cross. Who loses under this proposal? Those that rely most heavily on private giving. organizations dedicated to arts education, music, and cultural programs. Foundations have not been immune from financial losses either. Far from it. The philanthropic sector has sustained losses of 20 to 45% of its assets. Now more than ever, it is time to encourage as much private giving as possible. We respectfully request that Congress enact policies to do just that, and Congress can take immediate and responsible steps to put more dollars in the hands of charities. First, we ask that Congress reduce the excise tax private foundations pay on their net investment income from 2% to 1%. The two-tiered excise tax creates a disincentive for foundations to give more in times of great need, like now. A reduction in the excise tax rate for all private foundations would make more dollars available for charities. Second, Congress should extend and expand the popular IRA charitable rollover provision, which is scheduled to expire at the end of 2009. That provision drives more dollars to charity by allowing Americans over the age of 70 and a half to contribute up to $100,000 from their individual retirement accounts to charity without having to declare the contribution as income for the year. Both of these provisions would stimulate and encourage additional giving to nonprofit organizations who are in desperate need of resources. By further incentivizing charitable giving and not discouraging it, Congress can ensure that Americans will continue to have access to the important and valuable services they rely on from our nonprofit sector. I appreciate the opportunity to appear before this committee and share my thoughts on these issues and welcome any feedback or questions you might have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is John Tomasian. I am director of the National Governors Association Center for Best Practices. I appreciate the opportunity to appear before you today. I'm going to talk briefly about a report we recently published titled Arts in the Economy, Using Arts and Culture to Stimulate State Economic Development. As director of the NGA Center for Best Practices, certainly. As director of the NGA Center for Best Practices, our mission is to provide governors with advice and innovative ideas on the full range of domestic policy issues, including economic development. With regard to state economic strategy, our approach has been to help governors inventory their natural assets and identify the competitive industries in their states. When we do this, it becomes clear that creative industries are valuable components of all state economies. Estimates of the number of workers employed within these industries vary widely. We heard Representative Slaughter today talk about 5 million. That may be a lower bound. Others have estimated it to be as high as 40 million when you look at those who add creative content to products. A number of governors have documented the economic impact of the creative industries. Arkansas, for example, found that the arts and culture-related firms employ nearly 27,000 individuals and generate almost $1 billion in personal income for Arkansas citizens. In North Carolina, creative industries infused $3.9 billion into the state's economy in 2007. And in Massachusetts, the cultural sector contributed well over $4 billion. Recognizing these positive impacts, governors have led efforts to foster the arts and creative industries in their states, and they generally employ 4 broad tools: grants, tax incentives, financial aid to education and workforce training institutions, and technical assistance to artists and arts-related businesses. Small targeted grants are a frequently used tool. In Mississippi, for example, after Katrina, grants to artists in the order of approximately $5,000 were given to help the artisans and artists get back into their businesses. The program also included a series of workshops on business plan development and accounting to help artisans sustain their efforts. Tax incentives are another strategy governors have used to spur cultural enterprises. Maryland designates arts and entertainment districts that receive property tax credits for construction of arts-related spaces, exemptions from the state's amusement and entertainment tax, and income tax deductions for artistic work sold by artists that reside within the district. As of 2008, at least 8 other states had similar measures. Enhancing workforce skills through state universities and community colleges are another way governors can assist the creative industries. Connecticut offers a film industry training program at several community colleges. The program teaches individuals the basics of feature film and episodic television production, and also how to pursue entry-level freelance work in the industry. State universities also can bring artists and traditional industries together to stimulate new thinking and new lines of product. The University of California in Santa Cruz has partnered with local industry in the city of Santa Cruz to establish the Santa Cruz Design plus Innovation Center. The center leverages local design talent to grow and attract design-based businesses. Innovations such as the camera phone and carbon fiber bicycle frames is sprung from these activities. Finally, some programs focus on simply providing technical assistance to artists and artist entrepreneurs who are establishing arts-related businesses. The Alaska Native Arts Program provides workshops and business courses in centralized locations to address issues important to any small business, such as quality control, market analysis, pricing, and federal and state regulations. Other program activities help individuals network, identify funding opportunities, and reach larger markets for their work. In conclusion, these examples and others highlight the fact that the governors are leading efforts to capitalize on the benefits creative industries can offer. Creative industries can create jobs, they can attract investments, they can generate tax revenues, and stimulate local economies. A creative workforce, as been discussed here, also can contribute to product innovation and improve the competitiveness of traditional industries. I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you today and look forward to answering any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And again, thank you to all of the witnesses for your testimony. Let me say at the outset that I may be in a minority here, but I think President Obama has raised a very fundamental question about fairness. And that question is very simple, that a family that doesn't itemize its deductions gives $100 to the arts and it costs them $100. A family in the 25% bracket, it costs them $75 to give that $100. And a family that's in the 35% bracket, it costs them $65 to give that $100. And the question is, would we cap it at 28%? Why would we subsidize wealthy people with taxpayer money to give more money to the arts than people who are working and make a decision? And in fact, I think about half of all this comes from people in the lower brackets when you add it all up. In spite of the remarkable generosity of wealthy people in terms of the arts, there's a huge slew of people there that are in that position. That's a debate for the Ways and Means Committee for the moment, not for us. And the Budget Committee last night. I just want to make that point, that I think it is a question to be raised about tax fairness and that policy. Let me begin by thanking you. You make a remarkable case that I've always believed existed, and I see in evidence in my own district and obviously in California of the fact that the arts are a huge engine for economic activity. However you want to describe it, and each of you have described it a little bit differently in terms of the economic activity to small businesses in Cedar City or to a large community in Miami-Dade, to that list of credits that you talked about, Mr. Daley. You know, when you see the TV program, you see the movie or the stage play, you only see the people in front, and you realize what's going on behind the scenes. We used to have a great tour of New York City with the Arts Caucus for many years from members of Congress, so that people could go behind and see what it took to manage all of that. Why does music come so late in the credits?
I don't know, and it's a very interesting
It's
question.
such an integral part of a movie, and can be, and overwhelming, and yet it comes so late. We'll take the answer off the air unless you really got the answer here.
No,
Everybody else, Key Boy Grip's there before.
Yeah, my brother-in-law is a very well-known composer and has made his living for a long, long time composing music for television and for movies. He's been nominated for, I think, 23 Emmy Awards, never won, and a César Award, which is the French Oscar. And he would be better equipped to answer that question.
Just something I wondered.
But I don't know. It's too bad because honestly, music can make or break a movie. I actually saw a movie that my son did the other day. I saw it at first at the Tribeca Film Festival, and it had a lot of music in it that was source music that set the tone. And of course, when it was released, they couldn't afford to pay for all that music, so it had a different score. And I have to say, honestly, it damaged the movie considerably. So I guess, I don't know, that's probably a bad thing to say. I shouldn't say that publicly. But, music is such an important part of
Thank you.
film.
Mr. Bear, in Cedar City, you've obviously made a decision that you're going to dramatically reduce the size of this generator that has brought, you say you think it's around $35 million in economic activity to the community. That's mainly because of the loss of foundation assistance. You talked, the foundations, obviously we've witnessed not only people's individual retirement accounts, but foundation investments of all kinds of dropped dramatically.
There are actually three reasons, and our foundations have actually hung with us. But our board in November, a lot of movers and shakers within the state of Utah and Las Vegas area, they said, with the economy doing what it's doing, we will not approve this budget unless you cut by 15 or 20%. And so we went back in necessity, and then we started looking at our pre-sales and our ticket sales and what the economy was doing. So, I mean, the three reasons were, first of all, reductions in foundations. Number two, the recommendation from our board, and then just the reality of the economy.
So the signals you're seeing when you look toward the summer season, the signals that you were seeing were
correct.
Telling you they
and
just
knowing
weren't
that
going to
we
show
wouldn't
up.
be good stewards, that we wouldn't be able to pay the others. And it was a very, very painful process. The hardest thing for me to read there was, since we brought up music, it costs $50,000 for us to have a pit for a live orchestra. We, since our inception, have had a live orchestra. And to make that, and I think that strengthens the case of the musicians over here, was terribly painful. But when we threw the $50,000, when we were trying to feed 9 shows, because we mount 9 shows, and those 9 shows feed all of those different professions, we chose to cut and pay a synthesizer and a man to orchestrate it for $24,000. And so it's a major artistic loss for us. Yeah. But the major thing that caused us to do that was the board wisely saying, if we don't prepare for this, there will be a problem here.
Thank you. I have a zillion other questions, but I know we're going to get colleagues time here. Mr. Platts? Mr. Platts is a co-chair of the Arts Caucus. He had a conflict and was unable to be with Ms. Slaughter at the opening, but you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I appreciate you holding this very important hearing and all of our witnesses, and do regret that I wasn't able to be here for my co-chair's testimony as well as the interaction with her in Q&A, but I do appreciate all of our witnesses for both your work regarding the arts and your testimony, both written and oral here today. If I had a chance to show you my office, it's what I call my children's private art gallery. I've got a 10-year-old and a 12-year-old, and it's my sanctuary down here. I'm one of the lucky ones. I commute from my district in Pennsylvania each day, and down here in my office, between my kids' photos and their artwork, and it's interesting how it's progressed from the finger painting to now pottery and more engaged pieces of art, paper mache projects and things, and great respite, and including the performing arts. I meant to bring along to what I'll call their playbills or programs. My 2 children, with children in 2 other families, have on a number of occasions put on their own performances with my wife and 2 other moms, and where they do invite family, friends come in and actually watch performances. So we're very blessed in them having that exposure. Thankfully, they have gotten my wife's genes when it comes to artistic talent, not mine, because I don't have any. So the testimony, I want to very much associate myself with Congresswoman Slaughter's testimony, and 3 points in particular. First, her focus on tourism and urban renewal. I've seen that in my hometown of York, Pennsylvania, and a great mayor, Democratic mayor, Mr. Chairman, you'll appreciate, who's done a great job of economic revitalization, and the arts community has been a critical part of that. The arts district that he's created has really revitalized that part of the town, and got not just artists there, and they have a tax credit for artists who come and live at their place of business, above their studios and things, but it's gotten people like my wife and I to get down and not just visit those art shops, but also spend money in restaurants and things in that area as well. So the investment is very important and has a good return. A number of you, and Mr. Dale, I think in your testimony, especially your second point, arts and education, the importance of exposing our children. We're lucky to be in a school district that my kids do have art every week, several times a week, and have had that since kindergarten, and complementing what we do at home. And we know how it has benefited their creative spirit and how that transforms itself then. So the focus on education, and Congresswoman Slaughter talked about that as well. And then the third point in her testimony, and it really relates, Ms. Florino, to your comments on the charitable giving and the concern I do have, and I certainly, Mr. Chairman, respect your concerns about tax inequity, and that is not just in the area of charitable contributions, but lots of areas of inequity in our tax code and the complexity of it. But I would mention, I think, one thing in response, and that is, while there may be an argument that someone in a higher bracket gets a better benefit because of their tax bracket, a lot of those dollars, I know in our community, go to benefit low-income children, programs that they could not otherwise afford to attend, Shakespearean program or others, and we target that assistance to low-income families and their children so they can come and participate in the arts. So there is a return, maybe not through the tax code, but through the performance themselves from the generous. And I guess a long-winded introduction here to the question on the charitable aspect, because I see this as a partnership where we need to make investments, and I'll be testifying next week for an increase to NEA in the 010 appropriations bill, and joining my co-chair, and feel strongly about that. But I do see it as a partnership where it's not just the public doing it, meaning government in this sense, but partnering with the private sector, and that's the charitable donations. And Ms. Florino, your testimony laid out the $9 billion projected loss from all charitable giving, which will translate. My question really is to the other members of the panel who are involved with organizations that are recipient of those dollars. Do you share that concern that if we go forward with that proposal, that your organizations and artistic community in the broad sense are going to see a loss if we do embrace a tax policy that discourages charitable giving? And whoever would like to respond, maybe we'll start on the left and just go quickly. I realize I'm used up most of my time with the question, but
I would just point out that the arts, as I said in my testimony, are funded by a very fragile ecosystem of support. A very fragile ecosystem. Half of it from earned income, 40% from private sector, 10% from government. They need every break they can get from every sector, essentially. Earned income, we want a better economy. That's probably the most important thing. So the things that you're doing to create a better economy, more disposable income. Government is the great stimulator. It's been that way for 50 years, and in my testimony I talked about how that worked. We need the kinds of things that you've been doing there. But on the private sector, the information that comes, it needs to be looked at more as to what incentives work, and I've heard some different arguments here one way or the other, but whatever will continue to provide more dollars is what we need.
In the interest of time, to the chair.
By Mr. Platt's question in writing, it would be helpful, or we can contact you. We're gonna vote some.
Yep.
If I
Thank
might,
you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Platts. If I might, if we could ask if members, if we go to 3 minutes, we might get everybody in before the votes, because I've been given a note that we're going to have votes soon, and if you just limit yourself to one question or statement, I don't care what you do, but that way we may get through, and I know you came here interested enough and want to ask a question. Mr. Kildee, for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think that's a good idea. I want to expatiate something you said. You talked about the importance of music in movies. Several months ago, my wife and I watched a program which they would show a scene from a well-known movie without the music, and then with the music, and it was very revealing, really, very. Can you imagine watching Gone with the Wind without the music? Well, that's an extremely integral part of that movie. So I can't play a note. I probably tone deaf, but all my kids are musicians, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I really appreciate this testimony today. Growing up, arts put food on our table. My mother, Susan Polischutz, is a poet, and my father is a graphic artist. And as a result of my life experiences and background, I've always been a strong supporter of the arts. And I particularly appreciate this testimony today regarding the diversity of the arts, and also clarifying some of the commonly held misconceptions with regard to this very important sector in our economy. My only quick question is with regard to arts in rural areas. If somebody would like to address how sometimes one of the misperceptions is when people say arts, they think cities only, and a couple of you touched upon this. But talk about how this is really a national issue and how it benefits rural areas.
I'm really, really glad you bring that up because that is a misconception. The arts are vibrant and alive and necessary in rural areas, and particularly as by my testimony, I mean Cedar City, it's important, but go even smaller than Cedar City. I mean there are community theaters and symphonies in those areas, and I want to echo the importance of federal and state dollars because they help leverage the much larger private dollars, and especially in rural areas of particularly Idaho, Utah, Nevada.
If I could add to that, as a member of the North Carolina Symphony, we play all over the state. Perhaps one of the more gratifying things we do is every year we do a holiday pops tour where we are sure to get to the smallest communities in the state that raise money for once a year, and the entire town turns out. They cook for us backstage, and it's a huge event. So we play for, apart from all the school children all over the state, we try to reach to every community in the state. It's a really remarkable situation to see.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back to the remainder of my time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you all. I have two very quick questions. The first one, Mr. Lynch, is to you. Have you seen a shift over the years in response to your organization's Arts and Economic Prosperity Report? And what do you think that shift has been? And then the second question is to Mr. Daly. You recommended in your testimony that there needs to be a change in the discourse about how we deal with arts in our culture. And I'd like to know how you think we can start that discourse.
I've definitely seen a shift as we've been using economic data. That is not what the arts are about. The arts are about inherent value, beauty, ugliness, insight. That's what they're about. But it's always the questions that we get from the business community or the government. And as we have had more information about jobs and economics, we have seen at the state level, as has been talked about, at the local level and at the federal level, more interest in investment, more understanding. So it's made a huge difference.
That's an interesting question. You know, I was listening to NPR the other day, and some Wall Street guy was asked to name something in the stimulus package that he thought was pork, and he went right to the $50 million for National Endowment for the Arts. Yeah. And frankly, it pissed me off because it's such a minute portion of the budget, and that $50 million divided up among the many organizations that it go to generates so much private giving and gives so many people so much joy and employs so many people. You know, there are good investments and bad investments, and that's a really good investment. But I think the main thing is that, you know, a lot of times I think artists themselves, when they talk about the arts, they're a little bit embarrassed, and there's a little bit of confusion between what we see in the tabloid news and on, you know, TV programs that are focused on entertainment and about the arts. You know, when we see, you know, these young women sort of self-immolating on TV, you know, which is horrible and a horrible example for my daughter, that does not represent the broader spectrum of artists who are out there. You know, most artists are hardworking, disciplined people who you know, are vital members of our society. So we've got to start talking about it the way we talk about manufacturing cars and the way we talk about, you know, other important industries, and not be sort of embarrassed and not confuse the tabloid elements of, you know, our artistic community with the meat and potatoes of it, you know, which is my point. It's on it's spinach, you know, it should be on the plate with the meat and potatoes.
Mr. Hare.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A quick statement and a quick question for you, Mr. Dale. I have a son, by the way, who has a master's degree in teaching theater and is an actor, so if anybody's looking for somebody, you want to give me a call later, I'd appreciate it. Mr. Dale, I just want to know, given this bad economic climate that we're in, have you seen the effect it has on TV production of shows like Private Practice? And with these difficult times, who or what are the first resources that get cut?
As with most businesses nowadays, it seems, the first people to get squeezed are the smallest the people that need the employment the most, that make the least money, whose income, depends on paying their mortgage or their rent every month, are the first people to get squeezed. And I don't think the entertainment industry, at least the commercial part of it is immune to that. I think that happens in a lot of industries. But also there's an element of fear because there's less production. For instance, I mean, we could argue about this a lot, but when a company like NBC decides to put Mr. Leno on for 5 nights a week at 10 o'clock, that might be a good business decision on one level, but it puts literally tens of thousands of people out of work, not just the creative people. That's 5 hours of television every week where the technicians, the carpenters, the painters, the designers, the actors, the drivers are not hired. So it's tough, and I don't want to imply. I mean, there are parts of the entertainment industry that are very healthy. People still do very well, but the little guy is getting squeezed very hard and is very fearful.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your vision. Like Mr. Daly, I was a bit appalled when we went through the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, and the whole issue of funding for the NEA came up and was kind of held with contempt by many in the political circles and spheres, and one-upmanship. But I clearly recognize how vital a part of our economy the work of the community of arts and culture has been. I'm from Brooklyn, New York, where it's a major source, not necessarily the high publicity end of things, but certainly a major part of the growth and development, the stimulation of the communities that I serve. And so today's hearing is very vital, I think, to bring into the forefront for people how critical a component of our life and our culture, our arts actually are. I'd like to raise the question with both Mr. Lynch, Mr. Daly, and any others who can respond in a quick manner. What do you think that the diminishing of our arts and support for it means for us on a global scale? Because oftentimes people forget that there's something called global competition, and for so long the United States have been seen almost in a preeminent position, even though we interact across cultural and global lines. We've been very much a part of a movement that the rest of the world had embraced and then, had come around with. So I'd like to hear some feedback with regard to that. And
one of you is going to get 30 seconds to answer the question.
Mayors are critically interested in the arts because they stimulate competition. Their city attracting people from other parts of the world. That's why. And international cultural diplomacy, visa laws, money at the State Department all mitigate against that because there's not enough of those things.
Thank you. Mr. Tonko.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The arts build the crescendos in life. Without that, life is flat. That being said, in our earliest settings in schools, while in the New York State Legislature, I promoted certification only for those teachers who can exchange the message of the arts with students. What can we do to inspire greater participation in our schools, to grow that group of artists out there, because we're such a, I think we're devoid at times of cultivating the arts in our students?
That's a huge, and I love, very passionate about that. Every kid has to perform. So it's about encouraging performance and creation of art at a young level. And I think you see that there's some great programs that are out there right now that I'm sure they can talk about, and also the NEA sponsors a number of programs that way too. But just celebrating the programs that are presently existing out there in the schools. I'm sure you can all think of a great teacher that you have had in the past who taught your students or taught you because of those performance. Now, in regards to a federal answer, I know statewide we actually have, in the state of Utah, the arts are huge, and it's actually part of the Utah State Office of Education to train every teacher how to use art in their classroom. It's part of our core. and it is required as part of the core. It's as necessary as math and science, and that needs to be done nationally. But the state of Utah, I think, is leading the charge that way and see that as a necessary vitamin, as necessary as the spinach that Mr. Daly shared.
I also think that it's important for all of us on this panel, for politicians and for people in the business community, to start acknowledging the arts in our daily lives. I mean, I defy anyone in this room to look around them and not see something, a tie, these paintings, the curtains behind the chairman. Every one of these things was designed by an artist, was drawn, and the chairman himself, a work of art.
A piece of art.
These things are tied in with technology and design and innovation and manufacturing. It's not something else. It's everywhere we are.
Ms. Florino, you wanted to quickly say something.
Yes, very quickly. I think one of the problems is that we've kept the arts in a silo, and we haven't seen the impact on math education and English education. And we know that there are plenty of studies that prove that, in fact, musical skills and math skills are very connected. And I just want to say that I think that we as a foundation, along with many individual donors, have been looking to out-of-school experiences to make that integration. One example I want to give you is a family reading partnership program in Ithaca, New York, which we have funded for a long time, and which would be categorized in many places as a literacy program. But the director of that program has been insistent that children not only be given books at birth and given books in early years, but that they be given beautiful books. And so the art of those children's books has been as important in generating their interest in reading as the words on the page. I think the more of that we can do, the better we will be in the future.
Ms. Woolsey.
Thank you. You're a perfect straight woman for me, Ms. Florino. One of our other efforts here on this committee is elementary secondary education, which we will be reauthorizing. Secretary Dick Riley under Bill Clinton has been and many others, instrumental in our writing art and music back into the curriculum. And so knowing that, I'm going to ask Mr. Daly and any of you, when I go to the movies and I see the credits, because one of our responsibilities here is equality for girls and women, it's the ratio of man to woman is just not equal at all. I want to know why that is. Are we doing something in our education system? Is NEA doing something that's making it way more possible for men to survive? Or do you know anything about that?
Well, that's a tough one. I do know that, since the dawn of drama, men have dominated theater and storytelling, and I don't know why that is. Shakespearean plays are predominantly men. Greek plays are predominantly men. That is a good and really valid question. I'm not sure what the answer is.
Does anybody have a
refreshing
suggestion?
though? Every one of our stage managers are females, and I think there's a reason for that. They know how to manage people. They know how to get stuff done. I don't think it an accident. Occasionally, you'll have a male stage manager that will sneak in there. I do think that's something that needs to start down at that lower level, elementary, to say, hey, women, this is something you can do. This is an industry that you can do too.
It isn't because stage managers are underpaid.
Actually, all of our stage managers that work at that level are equity stage managers. They receive the same wage.
And I also should say that my show, Private Practice, is women run. I mean, it is an estrogen heaven over there. There are women who are running the whole show over there.
They often ask the Speaker of the House how she can run the Democratic caucus in the House. She says, mother of 5, grandmother of 7 now, I think, and I use my mother of 5 voice every now and then, so it seems to work. Mr. Platts, any final comment?
Again, just my thanks for your hosting the hearing and for all of the great testimony we've received. Hopefully, partnering all together will do right by
thank you
by arts.
Let me thank all of you for your testimony. We wanted to make, and the President wanted to make, and the Speaker wanted to make an important statement about the arts in the Stimulus Act, that this is an important part of our economy. This act was about going to those sectors of our economy where we could stimulate economic activity, where we could have a multiplier effect, whether it was in construction jobs or in teaching jobs or in the arts. and that's what we wanted to be able to do. I think we did it right. Those who suggested that this was $50 billion in pork, those are the same people that said it was pork to try and repair and keep from sinking into the Potomac River, the Lincoln Memorial and the Jefferson Memorial. So their value systems, you know, kind of coincide and meet at that point. This has been a wonderful opening night, if you will. This is in a series of hearings. We're going to move on to education. We're going to move on to other aspects of the arts in our society and the importance of them. And thank you, all of you, for the work you do with education groups in your areas and in your cities and your industries. It's a remarkable thing to watch children be engaged with the arts. And it's not just studies. I spend a lot of time in classrooms around the country. I can take you to where the music and arts have changed the educational performance and the opportunities for those young children. They say the two best ways to engage children in fractions is with a ruler and wood shop and a baton in a music class. And then they'll start to appreciate and understand fractions, which they always seem to stumble on, as I did. Geez, no wonder I was a bad French horn player. Okay. Geez, all these things that get revealed up here sitting as chairman. This is tough. But thank you so very much for your time. It's valuable, it's important to us, and we're glad that you shared it with the committee. Before adjourning, I got to make unanimous request to consent to open the record of last week's hearing, the importance of early childhood development, later in the arts, through Tuesday, March 31, 2009, 14 days from the date of the hearing, during which members may submit extraneous material. So I don't have to do that in the next hearing. I will request today, without objection, all members will have 14 days to submit extraneous material and questions for the hearing record. We may, members may want to submit questions to you. We hope that you would agree to respond to those questions. And again, thank you so much for what you do for the arts, for our communities, for our economy, and for this committee with this morning's hearing and your participation. With that, the committee will stand adjourned. Behind you, what's going on is it's a little bit like off-track betting here. I'm trying to see if I can beat the other 208 people who haven't voted yet. Although the clock's run out, the race is still on, and because I'm old and fast, I think I can do it. But thank you very much.